The Mesopotamian marshes where the biblical Garden of Eden allegedly bloomed centuries ago once covered a vast stretch of land from central to southern Iraq. Its waters sway gently as canoes glide through narrow, watery ways past towering trees that frame the idyllic landscape. The area's beauty has been disfigured by years of turmoil and dysfunction. The wetlands have receded and some have altogether disappeared, and the ancient manner of life that supports marsh dwellers has come under direct attack. Animals no longer bask in the sun, and birds can no longer be heard singing. Decades of agricultural projects, water diversion schemes, and wars have contributed to the area's near complete desiccation. The scale of destruction has stirred horror and outrage at the sight of this ecological catastrophe, the roots of which extend much further back than the First Gulf War. Among the earliest marsh drainage schemes were those drafted by British engineers and famously outlined in the 1951 Hague Report, named Control of the Rivers of Iraq. It emphasised the need to reclaim the marshes and promised to maximise land usage and feed the communities of Diqar, Maysan and Basra with clean running water using a process known as leaching. It was in determining Iraq's full land potential that British firms turned their attention to the Mesopotamian hinterlands beneath the drive towards modernisation. Their plans came into effect in 1953 with the construction of a new watercourse named the Third River Project, and with that the depletion of the wetlands began. The aim was to produce more arable land and to provide better quality of water from Iraq's twin rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. The project extended well into the 60s, but it was not until the mid-90s that the wetlands were bled dry. Although it was unknown at the time, the adoption of these British designs by subsequent Iraqi rulers would later contribute to the erasure of one of the region's oldest ecosystems. What started off life as an agricultural endeavour soon turned political. The most fateful of events arose in the 1980s as Iraq and its neighbour Iran fought out a bitter war. Within the first 3 years, water came into use as a strategic weapon and natural barrier of defence. Lake areas and the marshlands in particular were transformed into launch pads for Iran's amphibious attacks. As noted by one historian at the time, Iranian engineers used portable dams and sluices to ease their passage, a strategy Iraqi engineers tried desperately to mirror. Despite its modernised weaponry, the lawless frontier, as Saddam Hussein viewed it, deprived his forces of their military strength, as took place during the 1984 Battle of Khaybar, in which Iranian soldiers occupied the lakes of Hawija, using the wetland ecology as a natural fortress. Deploying a flotilla of draft boats, Iran shuttled its forces across the Hawija marsh, eventually capturing the Majnoon Island, the centre of Iraq's southern oil production, discovered in 1977. These methods allowed for the flooding of the marshes, and under the cover of darkness, Iranian soldiers with rifles slung on their backs edged their way through the waterlogged jungle of reeds. Enormous earthworks were built to prevent Iranian entry, but even these failed to keep them at bay. In an effort to recapture Majnoon, Iraqi helicopter gunships were sent in to hunt down the enemy, killing and wounding thousands. But for both warring parties adamant to secure victory, the fate of these ordinary civilians was of little importance. Swathes of forest and land where they had lived were torched to allow Iraqi armour in to build ground defence positions. Forced out of their natural habitats, many marsh dwellers resettled to the west of Gurna and Basra. Others were relocated to the desert and offered small brick dwellings, but received little more than empty promises of improved living conditions. The war eventually ended 8 years after it began, but left the entire area devastated. Meanwhile, state engineers forged ahead in building what had been renamed the Saddam Prosperity River. There was no change in the official justification. It was still the idea that the marshes needed to be reclaimed for agricultural development in the name of national progress. The execution of the plan to drain the swamped lakes was not new, however, but a recycling of British policies by the Ba'athist government. But across the years of Iraq's fraught history, the project was no longer just that. And it was during Iraq's third war after Saddam ordered the invasion of Kuwait that the Marshes acquired a political life of their own. After the army's defeat and the forceful suppression of the Shia uprisings that followed, the Marshes came to be known as the country's very own Sherwood Forest. As cases of desertion grew, some soldiers fled to the wetlands, an ungoverned land that provided them sanctuary from the watchful eye of security agencies. Ex-soldiers were not alone in using the marshy environment. Throughout the war, the area accommodated the largest concentration of Iranian-backed al-Dawah and Bedr rebels aligned to the Supreme Council for the Islamic Revolution in Iraq. To the government, they were subversive elements backed by Iran, where many of them lived in exile. Many re-entered Iraq through Hawija, returning back to their country as fugitives, who found the perfect hiding place in Iraq's marshes. The troublesome waters became an object of scorn for the ruling establishment, militarized for the aim of crushing dissent. And fearing for their lives, many fled to Iraqi cities, as others trickled into Iran, where they settled in temporary encampments. The draining of the marshes became necessary for sealing off the borderland from Iranian infiltration, but it was also viewed by Saddam as an opportune solution for suppressing rebel activity, a solution that carried enormous costs. By 1992, the route of the Third River, whose construction began 3 decades earlier, was finished, and 2/3 of the area's waters had been diverted from Mahmoudiya to Gurna, adding a third watercourse between Iraq's twin rivers. The project's completion was accelerated by political motives, an aggressive counterinsurgency campaign with water diversion at its core. Tactics first proposed by the British Hague Report proved vital in later years for the Iraqi government in its drive to flush out rebels. The consequences are as these scenes lay bare: cracks inches deep where water once pooled, and an emptied landscape once adorned by rich vegetation, buffalo, and traditional cathedral-shaped Maldive houses. As British explorer Wilfred Thesiger long predicted, soon the marshes will probably be drained, and when this happens, a way of life that has lasted for thousands of years will disappear. What Thesiger failed to predict, however, was the rebirth of the marshes. By 2004, the unpredictable had happened. Signs of life gradually returned following America's 2003 invasion. Saddam's removal helped to rejuvenate old hopes and pave the way for the return of displaced inhabitants. Floodgates were reopened and dikes were destroyed in an effort to reflood the parched terrain. Hawija marshes, previously a gateway from which Iranians entered Iraq, were rehydrated, but flooding only allowed for partial restoration and was not without challenges. People loudly celebrated the area's recovery, but poor management of the newly inundated marshes marked a new era of suffering. Competing water demands, reduced rainfall, poor irrigation, and pollution continued to prevent the area's restoration, as the promises of state officials ring hollow. 2005 may have witnessed the restoration of nearly 55% of the area's historical size, but marsh life has suffered unduly. Polluted and reduced water are among the biggest challenges threatening the livelihood of inhabitants, and the number of people that have returned is still a fraction of the original population size that now rely on roads to transport goods in and out of their towns. Suffering is not only confined to the human population. Freshwater supply problems have severely impacted aquatic life, fish, and other marine animals especially. Many worry about the future and what lies ahead as these problems play out against the backdrop of an ailing economy. It seems that a familiar struggle has been revived in spite of the efforts of locals to keep memories of a richer past alive from one generation to the next. But the tales of glory told run counter to the challenges that characterize daily life. Efforts to restore the lands are continuing, but the economic losses that Marsh Arabs have been subjected to over the years are difficult to reverse, and work opportunities remain scarce. This has forced many into an underground economy, some even engaging in predatory activities. People are still in dire need of basic services, yet their woes occupy little attention in global media. Even 13 years following Saddam Hussein's ouster, distrust of the local government remains widely felt. Many residents accuse the state of not having done enough to alleviate their problems. A population that once numbered at 300,000, now reduced to 40,000, feels there is no guarantee to see their ancestral lands restored anytime soon. Improvements are slow, and the unique habitat remains at grave risk. While environmental laws in Iraq do exist, issues such as these are sidelined as the state devotes its energies and budget to defeating the Islamic State. Without fresh water, there can be no life or revival nor survival of the Mesopotamian lands. Echoing promises of restoration remain unmet in the eyes of families struggling to survive. But amid stinging reminders of a recently lived history is a dream to see the marshes rising from the ashes for the area and its people to reclaim their fate.